The other day, I was invited by the wonderful people over at Paramount Pictures to an advanced screening up in London of John Krasinski's new film, If. I'd only seen one of the trailers and I think a couple of the posters as well, but the idea of imaginary friends and just the whole theme of imagination in general had me intrigued, and I was very much looking forward to seeing this film. Because I personally think that the idea and concept of imagination within just films in general is something that doesn't get approached that often. Occasionally, auteur filmmakers will look at the idea of imagination through a specific lens, like Christopher Nolan did with Inception, and he looked at it through the lens of dreaming. But occasionally, you will see this sort of thing crop up in family films and children's films through the perspective of childhood imagination, with films like Where the Wild Things Are and Bridge to Terabithia. And If feels very similar to those films in that sense. The fact that this film is about imaginary friends and childhood memories in the first place kind of solidifies that anyway, but I was intrigued to see what John Krasinski would do with that idea and these specific themes that he's decided to tackle. And thankfully, I can say that John Krasinski, for the most part here, has succeeded. I really liked what he was able to do with this film, and I definitely think it's a film that gets better the more it goes on, because within the first half of the film, the first section of it anyway, it does feel a little bit disjointed and it doesn't quite know what it's trying to do. But once more of the imaginary friends start to be introduced, the movie starts to find its flow a bit more, and it just gets a lot better from there on. Now, going off of the one or two trailers that I did see for this film, I went into this movie thinking it was going to be very comedy focused, and don't get me wrong, there is a lot of humour in the movie, some jokes that work and quite a few that do, but this film ended up having an emotional aspect to it that I genuinely was not expecting. Again, there is comedy in the film, and it, for the most part, works, but there is an emotional core to the movie that really kind of sneaks up on you, and it just kind of comes out of nowhere. Like, the people I saw this film with, I think were also surprised that it ended up making them cry first thing on a Saturday morning. And I think, in regards to its emotional aspects anyway, it does a really good job of remembering what its core messages and themes and values are, and always make sure that they are front and centre. Even when you start to forget about what the message of the film is, it will always try and bring it back round in some shape or form through one of the many characters we've come to know and love throughout the movie. And I think it's a really good way of doing it, and yeah, it's just really well handled. Once the film finds its flow from a certain point onwards, the humour gets better, the emotions get stronger, and I think it definitely has its heart in the right place, and it knows what it's trying to say. And I think the messages that this film is trying to say are things that we kind of need to hear nowadays, especially in a society and world where everyone expects people to just grow up very quickly and just get on with the job and kind of forget about their childhood selves. I think the messages that this theme has are very poignant and are very moving as well, and I genuinely think these are things that people need to hear, but especially will work and I think will resonate quite well with today's younger generation. Like, I can honestly see If being a future childhood classic for younger generations now, not just because of its themes, but also because of its lovable characters, its story, and just the general way in which it's presented. And that's another thing, I absolutely loved the characters in this film, especially all the imaginary friends, because there are just so many different routes and avenues you could go down in terms of what type of things were created by a child, and this film really does delve into that in some really creative and funny ways. Like, for example, one of the imaginary friends is just a glass of water with an ice cube in it, and when he's asked why his child made him like that, he's just very blunt in his response, and he just goes, "I have no reason, my kid was just thirsty, he just wanted a glass of water." It's certain quirky things like that that I think will help this movie connect on a personal level with loads of people out there, because I'm pretty sure there was a point in your life where you were a child and you came up with this weird wacky character, or you just decided to make a friend out of this weird inanimate object. Like, there are just certain things that this film really taps into that I think are just genuinely really funny, and also, again, lean into the heart of the film when it needs to. And it's just really well done. It's got a great sense of humour, it's got lovable characters, it's got a really good, solid sense of heart at the centre of it. And plus, John Krasinski's direction is also really good. And there's some really good needle drops as well. And when it comes to comparing If to other films that are in a similar genre that tackle the idea of childhood imagination, I think this one really stands on its own 2 feet. It could have gone down a typical sort of fantasy route that those other examples I mentioned earlier do, but thankfully it doesn't, and it keeps everything light-hearted and grounded in a sense of reality. And I really like that, and I think it works in the film's favour, and helps kind of highlight these messages that the film is trying to say, but also helps add a certain sense of relatability to the main story and the main character that we're following throughout the whole film. So guys, those are my thoughts on If. If you've seen the film, then please let me know in the comments what you think of it. I really liked it personally. If you like the video, then give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Bye.